Because it's not a movie you can discuss casually, and that's what we're learning. Like this is deep.
I feel like you're the only one I've talked this deep about it with. I think one thing we can promise is there's gonna be no other review like this.
Oh my god, I don't think I've ever done a review like this either. Because it's like we're both like, it's good. These are our opposing viewpoints.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is we both enjoy the film objectively. Whereas I think it was an emotional journey, and you think it was an intellectual journey, but I think my intellectual processing of it was just different than yours.
Yes. I might slap that onto the beginning of the video just to set the theme for all this.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, that's my point.
Because your life experience at
because I'd still definitely recommend the movie. I think I just realized exactly the core thing that is missing for me.
We did it, you guys.
What's happening there, Reject Nation? We are going to talk about Eternals. All you saw before was pretty much like what I would say in a long social media Twitter thread, you know, bullet points of things. Sometimes people watch those and they think that's a full review, and it's not. So I got Coy Jandreau with me today. What's your like quick 30 seconds to 60-second opinion
of the entire film?
Yeah.
30, 60 seconds.
What would you say on Twitter?
I would say that Eternals is not only unique to itself, it's unique to the sci-fi genre beyond the superhero genre in that it approaches subject matter in a way that could only exist in the film that it is. So it's dense, it's complicated, it's all encompassing, but that movie couldn't exist to its scope and scale without the MCU films that led before it. So it's a trusting, endearing, bold choice of filmmaking that should be an independent film with a $200 million budget that exceeds at all the things it set out to do.
So in other words, Coy hated it.
Hated it.
Yeah.
Hated it.
Coy hated the hell out of it.
That was only like 40 seconds.
I was
really worried.
That was really good, man. You nailed it.
I was like,
nailed it.
8 minutes?
So after I put out my quick thoughts on the movie, what I love is that, you know, when you put out quick thoughts on the internet, I think a big part of communication is listening. It's like how they say in acting, a big part of acting is reacting. My favorite form of communication is mind reading and assuming. I think you guys nailed it. I absolutely said that it's not a typical MCU film, so I hate it. I said I didn't like it. I remember saying those words that I don't like it. Yep. I remember saying there's not enough mindless action in here. Yep. I remember saying I don't get it.
Was it dense?
I think I might have been the only one to have said those words. No, what I want to do is, like in the words of Vision, I request elaboration on myself here. Yes. So what I want to do really quick, and you know, Coy, he'll overpower this whole conversation in just a couple minutes.
I got you.
But I would like to elaborate on a couple of things first. So with the movie Eternals, this basically has two plot lines you're following. I would say a third of the movie, and it's set up from the get-go, and they've already established online that you are going to be in the past a lot. So 1/3 of the movie you keep cutting back to is the Eternals, them coming into existence, why they're here on Earth, and you're watching how they like took on the deviants through thousands of years of history and how they helped humanity in the shadows. And then the other 2/3 basically sets them up that they haven't been together in thousands of years. The deviants are back, so it's about getting the band back together, right? That's probably the most efficient way to explain the plot of the movie.
2 hour and 40 minute movie. There we are.
Yeah. So Eternals are these like wonderful beings that were created by celestials. And so I think like one thing that I really appreciate this movie for being, I think when I said that it's dense and I'm still processing it, that communicated to a lot of people that I'm still trying to understand the movie. But I'm like, no, that's not really what I'm processing. What I'm processing is to see how I emotionally feel towards this movie. Did I really like it? I honestly didn't know at the time. That's why I was like, I guess it's okay.
In fairness to Greg, I tweeted out a sentence or two and said I'd be back in the morning for my first thoughts. So I took a night. He did not.
Yeah.
So I think it's not fair to say like person dumb, waited, think. It's literally a matter of processing, rendering.
Because as much as the common term for this movie is dense, it's not as dense as Dune. It's not as dense as The Matrix. It's dense, sure. I really love thematically everything they're dealing with because there's so many different themes that you are handling in this one movie. Pretty much handling Genesis all over again. And I love movies that not only do sci-fi fantasy, but also managed to mix it in with religion simultaneously. I do feel like it's not actually a difficult movie to follow. I don't think it's a hard movie. It's not like watching Tenet. The movie actually does one thing that I think it does better than a lot of MCU movies is it breathes. It takes its time. It really allows you to sit with things, and I really appreciate that. And I think all the themes they are exploring are very awesome in this movie, dealing with humanity, creation, rebirth, love. They got a whole, and there's more in there than even just that. The thing though for me, and I felt like I articulated it, but apparently not. I was saying I don't really know if I felt much while watching it. I thought it was a great observation piece at the time, and it didn't quite hit me until the next day of why I felt that way. Here's what I'll say though, too, before I go into it. I'm not the kind of individual you guys might have seen with a few movies here, not a lot, a few. I've changed my mind on some movies over time when having a different perspective on it. I'm not the kind of individual who's married to his own feelings or opinion. I know what they are currently about this movie, and I don't take back anything I said in my instant reaction. I also want to watch it again.
And I presented something to you that you said affected your overall take.
There was a negative criticism I had towards Druig and it's the only thing I really talked with Coy about.
Yeah, because
beforehand,
my boy.
I talked about Druig, and he said something there, and a couple minutes later I was like, actually no, that does enhance my perspective on it. Here's why I think I wasn't emotionally drawn to it. And so I'm very curious to know, for someone like you who said who cried a couple times while watching this, and those 2/3 of the plot that they are going through, there are a lot of conversations that they're having. Like, a lot of it is mainly just the Eternals getting the band back together and a lot of conversing. Not really a lot of action. It's mainly a lot of conversations exploring the themes of what I was just talking about. What I noticed the next day was, okay, I get their goals. How they say every character needs a goal. They gotta save Earth.
Spoiler.
Yeah, right? They gotta save Earth. And then the plot gets crazier. They have that thing in the MCU where it's like there's an actual bigger reveal ahead than just deviants are back. Because for me, when they're showing the 1/3 of the story, whenever they're encountering deviants, they're whooping ass like it's no problem.
Right.
It's like not a problem for them. When the main catalyst for the present day plot was deviants are back, I'm like, do I really need to worry about this? And it's a while before they introduce another layer to make the threat actually more menacing. I think what gets me personally emotionally attached to characters and their journeys and their goals is really getting to feel why they have that goal. Mm-hmm. Whys and goals, not just goal. Take like two different characters. Tony Stark. He wants to help save the Earth, and we know why in that movie.
Yeah.
You see the experiences, you feel the experiences he goes through, so you know why. Or even take a villain like the Mandarin in Shang-Chi. Mm-hmm. You know his goal, and the movie really lets you sit with why and show you why. Mm-hmm. And I thought with this, they do so much conversing just amongst themselves, and it's kind of a debate of like, should we save humanity? Should we not save humanity? And it was a lot of telling, and I never got invested in why they should save humanity or why they have these goals. Some people are telling me that, sure, it's dealing with the relationships of the Eternals. And I never even really got the sense from them that they're longing for family connection with each other, when a lot of people have told me that that's a big part of the movie, is them coming together and you really feel like they're a family. My point being is that I get all their goals on paper. I just, as characters and a storytelling journey, I thought everything around it was much more interesting. I think that everyone's really distinct, and you get time with every one of them.
Yep.
I really appreciate that, and I appreciate everything they're talking about. I just felt like it was more coming from here and not much from here, and for me, that's a big factor for me enjoying a movie. Funny enough, it's like the tone and the mood and the atmosphere wasn't enough to make me fall in love with it, and the way how like Dune sort of got me.
Can I counter?
I don't want you to like argue me, but I just want to hear your perspective.
But my perspective ties directly to that's why I want to. This is a good pivot point. One of the things that you just had as an issue is one of the things that I thought was a strength. So that's why I wanted to interject here.
Let's hear it.
So what I loved about this being an ensemble is that there isn't a single character that feels like is getting all of the light, all of the attention, all of the focus, all of the anything. And that had been a concern for me with certain people being cast. I was worried at Angelina Jolie, it would be an Angelina Jolie film in the Marvel Universe. Just like sometimes you watch a movie and even when it's an ensemble, you're like, but that person's a movie star. And they tend to be like, oh, whole cast, but look over here. At no point did I feel like this was Angelina Jolie and Friends, when in a lot of cases I feel like it's like Wolverine and the X-Men. Like, no, it's the X-Men. So I really appreciated the fact that it was such an ensemble, that the conflict all came from those discussions, to the point where I loved that I knew all of their arcs and I knew all of their goals so much here and here for me, that when there was any discrepancy in one of their opinions, and when you saw emotionally them struggling with a family member disagreeing with them, you didn't need it to be more than a conversation, because I felt hurt and I felt affected, because I knew this character so well and I knew this character so well. I trusted their arc so well that I knew inevitably in the next few minutes this would happen. And since I cared about them so much, this was enough for me in dialogue, much like Loki, where you have these great conversations with Mobius and Loki that are these insane existential ponderings, these beautiful introspective looks at the broadest concepts of man, that when these are in a perspective about man instead of from man, I'm invested as a man, and I'm saying that as a person. I don't want the internet to be like, I don't want women too. Mankind. I think it's really beautiful as a human being to hear these concepts as an abstract. I think it's really beautiful as a human being that is fascinated by theology, that is fascinated by mortality and morality, to have characters that are removed from that in their own way, discussing it about me like I'm not in the room. So what I got out of that, where you might not have connected in the way that you did, was I liked feeling removed, because I am.
See, that's the thing, is the main thing I told Coy before we filmed was I don't disagree with pretty much everyone who likes this movie. I think like what they're doing is technically it's all there. That's why it's hard for me to kind of articulate my point here. Take what you're saying. It's all there. And I think a big part of it is like, yeah, they've been in the shadows. They're larger than life and they were there to observe and help out, but not be directly involved. That's the part of it, though, that I'm like, they talk so much about humanity, but I never really got the sense of their relationship with humanity. So some people might say they've been in the shadows and the whole point is for them to be detached. But I'm like, but wait a minute. There's a middle plot here of they've been here pretty much not with each other. A lot of them have been living amongst humans for thousands of years. And I never got a sense of how has their relationship changed with humans? How has humanity affected them emotionally? And like, there's a couple characters where I know the answer very obvious. That's what I mean by why.
So for me, the conflict is the inherent why. For me, them having these feelings shows the stuff that we don't see. For me, them feeling like, I can't do this because of this. I don't need to see the A and the B because I got the C. You can't really have time for everyone's A and B. If they're feeling this, there's an emotional journey that landed them at that place.
Yes, I get what you're saying, because Ajak, there's this moment where she is talking about Ajax or Ajak?
Ajak.
Okay.
Mortal Kombat?
There's a moment where Ajak has this monologue talking about, like, I've seen humanity for, but with Salma Hayek with a much better accent and bigger boobs, as she likes to proclaim, and it's true. Ajak is having this speech about, like, I've seen humanity, how, like, all the terrible things they've done, but I've also seen, like, the loving, good things they've done. And that's what I mean. It's like they talk about some stuff. They talk. With any of them, you could kind of, like, you get that more with Phastos. That's a big part of why I love Phastos.
Oh, man. He's the one you get to experience the humanity mode?
Yes. Right, he is the Marvel's first, like, superhero gay character, and he has, like, a husband in this, husband or boyfriend, I forget. In the present day timeline, that's the part of, like, here's how relationally he has changed.
Yeah.
I'm not saying everyone needs to have a family or whatever. I'm saying this is an evident part of why relation has changed. Kingo, I think a lot of people, more than the fact that it's funny enough with Kingo, he's one of the most, like, talked about characters coming out of this movie, and out of any Eternal, he's probably the most MCU familiar.
Oh yeah,
like, you pretty much got Kumail Nanjiani to not 100% play Kumail Nanjiani, but he's pretty much doing his Kumail Nanjiani things with the comedy. He's funny, narcissistic, like, he's the most, like, MCU familiar type of them all. But he at least even gets a scene where he shows concern for people in a present day thing, totally removed from God. You know what I'm talking about.
But I think they all do. So I can right now in each and every character think of a moment that they show why they're invested in humanity, but I can't think of how to do that without spoiling the moments, because I don't want people to be, I don't want you to be like, I'm waiting for this person's moment with this, nor do I want to reveal it so they have any moments to look forward to. So that's what I'm saying with the spoiler review. Pin this moment and put a link right here, future Greg, connecting to when I break down all of the lead's connection with humanity when the spoiler review happens, because I can. And It's beautiful that they took the time, in my opinion, to give us, this is why they care. This is how it connects. This is how it conflicts. This is how it ends. This could be 8 movies.
See, that's the thing. I just don't feel for the why on it. I think the why is kind of touched on briefly.
But I don't feel like they needed to go into more than that, because it's a web. If it was a movie about this character or this character, then you'd follow their arc. But instead, it's a movie about these characters, so all the conflict comes from the web, the center. So you're not supposed to feel each individual person's connection, because that would be a different movie. What you're supposed to feel is the Eternals' connection as why the conflict, which hasn't been revealed, is in fact a problem. Because they do a beautiful thing in this film where they, in the trailer, describe why they didn't do anything at XYZ. That's the trailer. They reveal why, because homeboy Jon Snow asks why you didn't interrupt this blah blah blah. That's act 1 of a series of things about Eternals that wouldn't work if each of them had a streamlined connection. It's the conflict around that's revealed that matters.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong.
Full review is going to be you saying a thing, you agreeing with me and going, but I still feel emotionally void. Me being like, I cried twice.
I just didn't ever feel for the goal.
And what's interesting is we both enjoy the film objectively. Whereas I think it was an emotional journey and you think it was an intellectual journey, but I think my intellectual processing of it was just different than yours.
Yes. I might slap that onto the beginning of the video just to set the theme for all of this.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, that's my point.
Because your life experience
because I'd still definitely recommend the movie.
100%.
Like, and stop because of like, yeah, I didn't like it, but I still recommend it. I'm like, no, it's a good movie. That was just something I found myself craving. I needed to get a better sense of it in order to care about the journey they're going on. That's why a lot of Bond movies are kind of bland to me.
Right, because you just don't care about Bond.
Because I'm like, yeah, I get it, save the world, and that's better. Yeah, like that's why it can be boring for me.
There were 3 characters that I was so invested in that I'd watch them lead their own movie because their arc was so emotionally connected to me. Actually, 4. So 4 characters I would be like, give me a spinoff of blank right now. But that was based on emotion and the intellectual headiness of the character choice. Whereas like it sounds like you liked the movie, but that might have been the case for you. And that's going to be a lot of other people's experience.
You know what I just realized of maybe why the conversations don't click for me as well is you just made the comparison to Loki, which by the way is like WandaVision and Loki are my favorite things to come out of Phase 4 so far. I love the idea of conversation. I guess the movie kind of lacked a pulse for me.
Okay.
And a good ticking clock, and I feel like that's all you kind of need sometimes, because the ticking clock of the movie is introduced kind of late. It's like kind of like in the middle of this.
So funny because that's what I loved about it. The thing that I liked was that this doesn't have a 3-act structure in a traditional sense, because the thing that causes the ticking clock doesn't get revealed until way after you're invested.
But by the time I got to the ticking clock, I realized I don't really think I care as much about the goals as I.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah. The whole point is when you get to the ticking clock moment, that's when the goals become like, oh, this is a real threat.
And that felt
now we really need to. Now we need to really have this conversation. I think I like the conversations. I like what they're doing. What hooks me emotionally into conversations is a strong debate, though. I think this is where I'm going to differ with so many people on the opinion about the debates that are written here, because I didn't really feel like they were strongly written debates. I thought they were more interesting conversations. Take like the great debate in Jurassic Park of should we or should. That's pretty much what they're doing here, but with the world. You thought so much of can we, you never thought should we, or whatever that. How's that quote go? Do you know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
that's the point of the conversation. I found myself just kind of craving something more from them, like a little bit of an intensity or a little bit more of a pulse to the debates versus interesting conversations, like you're kind of watching a Greek god play or something.
The first bit up until the ticking clock is dazed and confused in its existing while observing, and I loved that about it. And I think that might be a big split with us. Is the thing I liked was that I felt like I got to experience what these conversations would be like if it wasn't in a movie. I got to experience like what would Eternals talk about and what would they be pondering without that clock. And once the clock came, I was like, oh, that ups the stakes, that's cool. But like it was like a great escalation of movie that I was already in. I was already invested. I was so invested.
That's fair. No, I mean, that's fair.
I'm so intrigued by the fact that like our exact opposing, because it's almost a 1-to-1 difference of how we felt about the things that I loved and you didn't, while still both going objectively a good movie.
See, I feel like I would have enjoyed this more as a read more than a movie.
I don't think I would have gotten through it as a read because I was so emotionally invested by the characters' acting choices to get me invested.
I think one thing we can promise is there's going to be no other review like this.
Oh my God. I don't think I've ever done a review like this either. Because it's like we're both like, it's good. These are our opposing viewpoints.
Yeah.
This has been mental gymnastics, not to spoil anything, because all of my points are tied specifically to moments that I loved getting to experience without knowing much about it. The trailer's done an awesome job of saying like why you should go see it without revealing much of the plot. And it does a great thing where it surprises you in its Marvel way, like you referred to, but in a way more existential what would you do concept, in that you've already invested in so many characters that you might attach to a different character than me or to Greg or to the person you're watching it with, where I very specifically attached to 2 characters and kind of 2 more, but they all had different viewpoints to the point where I was like, how do I feel about this question?
Okay, see, I think that's maybe just my personal problem with this. I never found myself fully attached to anyone. I was kind of just like,
so that's how we experienced the movie differently. I was so attached to multiple people that when they would have a conversation, which you didn't feel as attached to, I was like, which side am I on? And that's what made the movie sing for me.
Yeah, I didn't have
that for like 20 minutes in. I had that so immediately.
That's so funny. I never had that problem. I love being thrusted into that position. I do. I crave that.
It was amazing.
Like, that's the thing, is I could see what the movie's going for at all times.
I got 4 Mobiuses.
I don't actually agree with the sentiment that there's going to be a big divide with this movie.
I honestly think the Rotten Tomatoes score is going to be on the lower side of Marvel, if not lowest. I don't know what the lowest is.
I think maybe audience-wise.
That's what I'm talking about. Critics is going to be in the middle. Audience is going to be in the low.
I don't think it's going to be rotten, though.
Oh, it's not going to be rotten. But I'm talking about, like, I think I would say
it's not going to be like Shang-Chi numbers. I get that. Yeah.
Critics are going to be in, I would say, the 80s. But I think that audience is going to be in like the 50s. And it's not going to be because of anyone's lack. Well, there'll be some people lack of intelligence because statistically some people are dumb.
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme of things, it won't resonate with some people like this conversation.
Why do you think there'll be a divide?
I personally think there'll be a divide because people are going to check out early if it's not the tone they're expecting. I think people are not used to things paced this way. I think this movie is a $2 million movie with a $200 million budget, in that it tells a $2 million style story. They make art house films with these concepts. They make smaller films with these things that are so timely, slowly paced, conversational. They don't make $200 million movies like this. The dichotomy between the mental experience and the emotional resonance is going to be much wider than any other film like it. There's nothing quite like a $200 million art film. They don't do this. So I think people...
I don't think it's that artsy.
It's very artsy. This whole movie takes place at sunset, Greg.
I think it's disguised as an artsy film.
The whole movie takes place at sunset. It's all a golden hour shot. That is the definition of artsy. There are more hand-holding shots than action shots. Yeah. And that's what I loved about it.
Okay, this is probably where I'm going to disagree with a lot of people then. I feel like it wants to be as more artsy than it actually is.
I think it wants to be more of an MCU film than it actually is.
See, that's where, but you see how we have these butting of odds here? That's what I mean. I felt that kind of butting of odds.
Dichotomy.
They wanted to go. You had a comparison during our Dune discussion, certain types of sci-fi genres.
Yeah.
To me, it wanted to be more Star Trek, but was kind of being pushed to be more Star Wars.
And I felt like it was more The Town, and it sometimes went in The Departed.
So,
do you know what I mean?
Because no matter what I say, it sounds like, what's wrong with that, Greg? I'm using that to support the reason of, like, I don't think it's as, like, slow and heady as some people are making it out to be, to the point where I'm like, there's still plenty of action in this movie.
I found myself less interested in the action. I actually thought the third act was when I was least invested.
You see, the third act kind of reminded me of Power Rangers.
There's a shot when the costumes are fully, like, you know, you've seen the costumes, and there's a moment where the lighting shifts, and I was definitely like, that's not the same movie in an emotionally resonant way. And that's when I was like, oh, I know why this is going this direction, but I liked the conversations more.
Let's look at Sersi and Ikaris's relationship.
Yeah.
That is a big part of this movie. That is a huge part of this movie. Is that in the past they were lovers, and then in the present they're not, but they're regrouped up, right? I could not feel anything for their relationship. I know we feel very different about this. I know. I know we do. Okay. Like, there was so much dedicated to them being in love, falling in love, and then it's very obvious that Ikaris still bringing in this girl. I kind of got it in the past. Like, I get it. They're like stoic, godlike characters. You know, when you're doing a love story, and I don't feel for them being, I think in order to feel the compelling weight of potential heartbreak around the corner, right, without spoiling anything, like, in order to feel the weight of that, or the tragedy of this what could have been a beautiful relationship between these two, but certain things divide them. I need to care about them being in love first, and I did not ever care for their love story. Take Blue Valentine.
Oh, that movie's amazing.
It's amazing. Why? Because it's not just people bitching at each other the whole time. Because when they do such a good job at cutting to them when they were falling in love, you forget about all that other crap.
Yeah, it's consistently.
Yeah. And I was like, I think when they're in love, they're really boring.
That would have been a not good 2-person movie. And that's the strength of this being like an 8-person movie that I'm speaking of the web of, because those are 2 of my 4. And I was invested in them in the broader sense. I cared about their relationship, but I cared more about how that relationship affected the conversation we can't talk about.
See, the thing though is my one counter to that is I find it odd that so much time is committed to that, yet I was way more invested in the specific relationship that has been revealed in magazines prior to this movie coming out about Gilgamesh and Thena. Their relationship, I cared so much more about that, and nowhere near as much screen time is devoted to that. I cared way more about the scenes where they paired up Druig and Makkari, way more than I do care about the thing they're really putting a lot of attention to.
But I think that was intentional. John had the issue with Dune with Timothée Chalamet, right?
Yeah, he's wrong.
And we can acknowledge that. But like with Chalamet being, he felt like having not quite the same amount of gravitas in those moments. I think you need to have your leads not steal attention away from the people with less screen time. I was invested in the relationship, but I didn't need it to be the weight of the other ones in the speed that it was because they had less time to show it.
I think that if you're going to put more time to it, it should hold it just as equal of weight.
I think it did equal weight.
Okay, for me it did.
Okay.
That's,
I'm saying
that's very much our divided.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
I was more invested in the web than anyone's relationship 2-on-2.
No, what I was getting at though was I don't think it needs to just be a 2-person movie. The way, because I know when you say Blue Valentine, like the whole movie's devoted to those 2. Mm-hmm. I'm saying I think there's definitely ways with the same amount of screen time where they could have made that way more interesting and to watch. Because this is the thing is like I talk to a lot of people who I've seen talk about this movie publicly, and they are totally shying away from a lot of things because they're obviously afraid of the internet. It sucks when people hate you for your opinion, right? And
feels great. We're real people.
I know this is an area of the movie that is not problematic, but difficulty getting attached, because a big part of caring about the journey, emotionally caring, feeling kind of disconnected from the love relationship that they keep putting in front and center, or the dichotomy between these 2. But yeah, I mean, you liked it though.
I did.
You cared about it.
Yeah. So
and I
just
did
me. Yeah. So I think that's been the thing is like we can both see the movie as working, but for different reasons, and the emotional resonance only worked for me in certain scenes, you for certain scenes, and that's going to be how people experience life up until the moment they sat in that seat. That's the thing about art is it's so a receiver. You can make whatever you want. It's how people receive it. That's why it's beautiful that movies are so varied. But for me, this movie accomplished something I didn't think was possible in this space. I didn't think you could have this many characters feel like an ensemble where it didn't feel like there were opposing viewpoints that didn't work. All the opposing viewpoints did work. And I love that it's a movie that deals with such concepts that is so conversational, but still is in the superhero space. Like it's very much a film that affects everything, but it also is something that if you've never seen an MCU film, you will get a lot out of.
True. Yeah. Perhaps.
I think someone that's never seen an MCU film can walk into this and love it.
Sure, yeah.
And that's not, you can't say that for most superhero films.
Yeah, that's fair.
And it's also a movie that if you're a devout superhero fan, you might not love. And I love that. This is how you keep the bubble from bursting. This is how you make films and movies. Like everyone and their mother since Phase 1 has been like, Guardians is a heist film. And I'm like, yeah, but this is something else and new entirely, in my opinion.
I guess I just didn't find it like as thought-provoking. Like,
I've been thinking about it nonstop since.
That's so fascinating to me because I love thought-provoking sci-fi fantasy. Those are my favorite kind of movies.
But if you didn't connect emotionally, thought-provoking won't work.
Yeah, I'm just more like interesting, and I feel like I've heard this conversation done better.
And I feel like I didn't ever I felt like I'd never seen something to this scale with this conversation has been going on since People.
To me, it was apparently like, I could think of other movies that did similar conversations but better, but what's supposed to make it unique and interesting is that you're watching it from like these godlike characters talk about it. That's the part of it that's supposed to make it more emotionally engaging.
And to me, this did more than the comics as far as making.
Oh, that's cool.
Like, I actually enjoy Eternals, the movie, more than most Eternals comics, and I don't get that experience very often. So that's the thing that really elevated it for me, is I was like, oh, that's what these comics represent. Because there's been a lot of times I was like reading out of continuity just for the sake of reading it. In fact, I think this was so good for me, it's going to retroactively improve a lot of comics.
Cool. I like to hear that.
I feel like this movie's gotten worse in your eyes as we've talked. You're like, I just feel nothing.
No, you make me appreciate this movie a lot more. I can't deny that. I think with the conversations, what was going on, why I wasn't finding the debate all that interesting, it would have been a much more fascinating conversation for me. Perhaps this is like just occurring to me now. It probably would have been a much more fascinating debate if it didn't feel like it leaned so heavily on humanity is good and here's why we need to save them. And I thought it could have done a much more interesting conversation / debate if they really talked about extensively as devoted to why humanity is also terrible.
I feel like there were three of I feel like there's 3 characters that have that.
I think there are characters who have that.
Yeah.
I'm saying the actual a lot of this is dialogue and them just talking in kind of barren locations. A lot of it seemed to really lean heavily towards that. That's what I mean by like, it's still a superhero movie. Like it seemed to lean so heavily towards that, and I thought it would have been cooler if they had a stronger conversation. It's hard. It is hard to talk about. So
right? Because I keep navigating away from my own brain.
There are characters who come to mind who are obviously I know what they think, but I think a lot of the screen time and script writing devoted to conversing about it was leaning heavily way more towards the good of humanity.
I think so too, but I think that's also like the only way humanity survives in real life. Like, I think the only way we keep existing is by assuming we're going to figure it out.
Totally. I just didn't find it for a movie. I thought it would have been more interesting.
So maybe that's another thing. Like, my baseline is always seeking an excuse to keep tolerating people. So as a human, I wake up.
As a human person.
Yeah, as me, I wake up and I go like, okay, this all sucks. This person's monster. I see this. I read this YouTube comment. People are awful. And then I'm consciously going, okay, find the good. And I felt that from this film. And I appreciated that because I'm an optimist by necessity. Otherwise, I can't keep operating because people have proven time and time again that we are devoid of most good, but you find those little fucking magic nuggets of humanity that are worth saving. Yeah. And I think this accomplished that.
I think it leans so much more into that, and I thought it would have been better balanced with having the opposite side of it. Kind of like what Thanos' point of view was towards the population. Sure. You know me as an individual. Of course, I support and try to live my life by that. I think though there are interesting conversations to be had with knowing just how much humanity has really messed up our world.
Sure.
Beyond just wars and violence, we've really just messed up the world too.
Right. And I think they address that, I thought.
They address, but they don't dive into it.
Man, we're going to do a 4-hour spoiler review because there's so much I want to say.
Like the 4-hour spoiler review. The music's good, guys. The way it sounds good. All right, it's going to get out of the way.
It's not a movie you can discuss casually, and that's what we're learning. Like this is deep.
I feel like you're the only one I've talked this deep about it with. Everyone else has been pretty surface.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, what are those conversations like?
The surface conversation is everything I agree with. The music, I actually think is phenomenal. I think it's great they shot on location. There are some action scenes that are riveting, while others I don't feel are as interesting. But it's not really about the action. It's about the story and the characters. The Celestials, everything realized them, the scope and scale, beautiful to behold. And you feel the scopic nature of it. Like it is so like the enormity, the seismic quality of it, more than just look how big that is. It really sucks you in. It's kind of scary. That to me elicited the most emotion when we like on just a visual mood tone level, cutting to the Celestials. That was the thing that would elicit the most emotion. I mean, like it's actually kind of scary to behold,
right? And
to get immersed into, I think is like they nailed that. The acting's good. It's just some people walk out and tell me that they like couldn't care less, or they care less about it or not.
This is why I don't talk to a lot of people.
I don't. But I think like so that's what I mean from like a filmmaking standpoint. I'm like, no, everything's solid. I don't think there's anything weak about that. Mm-hmm. You know, like I did find myself occasionally craving a more interesting environment for them to have the discussion. But as we've talked about this, I do think that it doesn't really come down to really the location where they're shooting. It was more about my issue with the feelings I had around the conversations,
Right.
less the location.
It sounds like the first act really is going to make or break everyone's experience of this. I think you're going to either need to fall in love with all of these characters like I did, or you're going to have a conversation where you can appreciate what's happening intellectually, but without the emotional resonance feeling hollow. And one of the things I do want to address is, and I didn't know if I would because the internet, but here I am, gonna be brave about it. The internet, I love how much we're getting to see people see themselves on screen more and more. I love that we're leaving the age of everyone has to look like the comic book, because these comics were written in the 60s when everyone's white.
Yeah.
And the whites have always claimed this shit. And I think it's beautiful that we're getting out of that into a world where we can adjust. There's a lot of gender swapping here. There's a lot of playing with sexuality here. There's a lot of seeing yourself on screen. I have never, ever once, look at me, had to complain about not seeing myself on screen. So I didn't expect at all to have a new level of emotional resonance, because I've had the Avengers looking pretty white for a long time. But I gotta say, when Druig was Irish, so Irish, and felt like my world, I'm wicked Irish, when he felt like home, I got to understand what so many people have been saying in a not just intellectual way. Intellectually, I've been so excited for so many of my friends to feel represented. Intellectually, I can go like, that's awesome. I've never felt it. And I think a big part of what made me love this film so much is Druig being Irish without being a cliche, without being a leprechaun, without being something that felt like they were using him as a plot device. Him just being Irish, I never would have, if you told me a year ago that would matter to me, I wouldn't have thought of it. And it feels so good and important to be like, that character here. And I think that's what drew me in the first act, is I did not expect to have a Marvel experience where I was like, this is suddenly resonating at an 11, where I wouldn't have ever known that would matter to me. And I think a lot of people are going to see characters that they're not going to realize are going to affect them as much. And they're going to go like, that's me. And then they're going to attach themselves to all the conversations in a bigger way.
Hopefully. That's what I hope.
It's huge for me.
I want this movie to succeed, because I think Marvel should continue to do different things and do things that are more bold and interesting versus formula.
Yeah.
You know, like, I completely agree with that. Like, I liked Shang-Chi, but you know, we talked about it. I had some pretty big gripes about it.
Sure.
The last half of the movie. I think I just realized exactly the core thing that is missing for me.
We did it, you guys.
I think I just realized it, because I noticed from our conversation and then what we talked about with Druig before, basically with Druig, the disparity that we have, without spoiling anything. I found the movie kind of muddied some of his motivation and intent. He explained, I'm like, no, I got that. I feel like they just didn't really quite nail the execution of it. And I think all around of why I love the shows more than the movies lately is because the shows get time to really explore all those things.
Dude,
and if
this
you,
would be great at 6 hours.
and if you look at everything we've disagreed on, it's always come down to, yeah, I just wanted more of that. And I wanted it to be more fleshed out. And I wanted it to be, and you're just like, yeah, it'd be great for like a 2-person movie. For an ensemble 2.5 hour movie, you can't do. And like, you have that in your mindset of the framing around it being a movie. The writer brain in me is going, I kind of want, like with Druig, I'm like, no, I get what they're doing. I just wanted them to kind of explore that more.
And we just talked about movies versus TV right before air separately.
Yes.
How you watch more TV than I do.
Yeah.
It might be literally a matter of formatting, where my brain is like, that's what you get.
And I feel like with this kind of movie, especially after dealing with the shows, which I've loved so much, the live action ones, I think that's what I found myself craving with pretty much everyone here is, I don't think it's like, I think for a movie, they put in the most they could without it feeling like, damn, you're filling this thing up. Yeah, you know? Like to me, I don't agree with like, it's convoluted. I don't think it's over convoluted.
It also doesn't feel bloated, which
that's my point.
Yeah.
And I know some might feel that way, but I think that's not the right word for it. I just found myself going, I just wish they explored this more so I could have felt more for it. Yeah.
But within 2 minutes of my emotional connection to using Druig as an example, I was able to say what
Yes.
and you saw it differently with just like a couple
Because you
sentences.
saw a white man on screen.
I was like, this man looks like me, which never happens.
Yes.
Who am I? No, but like his arc to me resonated, and I was able to explain like boop, 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 and then that opened your perspective like this. So
Yes.
maybe this is a movie where like a conversation with someone that didn't emotionally resonate, like having a talk with
Yes.
someone, like it might be just a thing we have to talk about with people that didn't feel like I felt.
I really love Gilgamesh a lot in this. He was the character I probably cared the most for. I loved him a lot. He's very, and I liked their relationship.
Yeah.
I did find myself kind of missing a little. That's the thing. It's like, I think like, no, the choice they make with Thena, I think is so interesting of what they do with, and the producers, writer, someone came out before even the premiere talking about like the plot with Thena of how she has a thing where she's like lost a lot of her memory, and Gilgamesh is helping take care of her. I found myself going, you got Angelina Jolie. I'm kind of craving a little bit more here because I like the idea of doing a more body language performance with her because Angelina Jolie carries so much depth in her eyes.
Yeah.
And even in her smile, like sometimes she just smiles at Gilgamesh, and I'm like, I don't think she's, wants to sleep with him, but man, does she have that like smile. You know what I mean? Angelina Jolie just has that smile.
Man.
Yeah, just like, damn, oh man, if she smiled at me, I would just melt in the ground like a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Man.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys strap in for the 4-hour spoiler conversation because I'm going to defend every single one of these points with examples. We're going to see it again. I really honestly like this. Well, the more I talk about it, the more I love it, which is not a common occurrence. And I'm really excited to like break down examples of why I felt, and you might not still, but there are moments that I can point to with almost every single one of your points that I felt.
Yeah.
And that's going to be your mileage may vary.
And I love that. I don't want people to not
Greg
watch
hates
this
the Eternals
movie.
Elba.
Yeah, look, if I don't like, I was pretty clear about how I felt about Black Widow, so I'm not going to be like, freaking Marvel people, go away. It's pretty obvious.
Just wants to go to the premieres, according to YouTube comments.
If you watch our review after, like, on the movie reaction we did for Black Widow, I'm ripping into that. And I don't feel like this is a movie to rip into. This is just one where I'm like, I wish I had a show. And I didn't think I had that thought until right now where I'm like, oh, it must be what it is. Essentially, I kind of wish we had a show. And it's kind of like a common consensus I'm having with the movies as of late.
But I love the theatrical experience so much. I wish we had a show that played in theaters. Like, I'd like to go once a week for 6 weeks. Like, I think I just want my cake and eat it too. Like, I just want to see these things as big as, like, I don't think this would have worked on TV. Like I
think it would have been better.
Oh man, that's so interesting.
Because you could have really explored
I would love
more of the relationships.
Minutes, I don't need to lose the theater experience for 3 hours more. I'd love it.
Oh, that's what you're saying. Yeah. I think you would have got. Of course, we wouldn't have gotten as much of a filmmaking experience at home. Yeah, of course not.
So I think juice worth.
See, I don't really care as much about that anymore. I care more. I feel like I've seen so much by this point that nothing really dazzles me anymore.
Dude, you weren't dazzled by the.
I was pretty
saying you were dazzled.
Dune. There were things about its mood and atmosphere and the ambiance that it has that just sucked my soul in, where Eternals didn't have any of that mood.
When I'm home, I'm so distracted inherently.
I never, by the way, I'm using Dune as an example, but I never watched Dune comparing it to Eternals. They're not the same
The whole movie, we were like,
yeah. I'm just like, here's what Eternals, there's nothing in Dune that was like, man, Eternals could have taken some notes. Ikaris
Eternals
was, should have been Ryan Gosling.
And Blue Valentine's Michelle Williams.
I'm just saying, Ryan Gosling got the stoic thing down.
He'd be a great Cyclops. Ryan Gosling be a good Cyclops. I'd like that stoic Cyclops.
Dude, Ryan Gosling, no, you can't hide his eyes. What's wrong with you?
Baby Goose?
Why would you hide the most power? That's like saying, hey, Will Smith, you want to be an After Earth and not have charisma? You'd be robbing.
I would be so impressed what he could do with the rest. He's got so many things. He's got more than just eyes.
Yeah, Richard Madden, you liked him a lot?
I did, because he was one of my 4. Ikaris was one of the 4. I was fully. I felt like he was comfortable with Ikaris in a way that I didn't expect from not knowing a lot of his work. He'd be in a character of that. Like, Ikaris is such an important Eternal.
Yeah.
And he really walked that walk, and I felt like he was a being of timelessness.
I think he did a great job. None of my issues fall down on performance. I'm like, no, I think everyone does a great job. It's just when something is so dialogue heavy, it's hard for me to be like, but the tone and the mood and the visuals were enough.
Right.
For me, I'm more caught up in the actual scene work.
Yeah.
And
that was enough for me.
And how the scene work really made me feel.
I'm really curious if the second time you get the emotional resonance and like it changes your whole experience.
Because I love debate, like 12 Angry Men, phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like I love a good debate movie.
And I didn't until recently, so that's why I don't think it'll do well.
I love David Fincher films for that purpose. I love Loki for that. Like I love debate. I really fully imagine that on rewatch I'll like it more. I think the deviants are there's a spoiler thing about the deviants that bugs me so. There's one thing about the plot that I'll say about that that I want to touch on. There is a thing about the deviants that they don't do that I feel like a show would have at least addressed. I'll tell you right now, just on my own personal level. What? Why did the Eternals
entire conversation?
But it doesn't feel like a conflict.
Oh, it totally did for me.
They barely talked about it.
Oh man, I thought that was.
I was like, that's a room for a real conflict.
The last fight. They like tried talking.
It's good they shoved it in at the very end so they couldn't explore it.
Spoiler review's gonna be a blast. It's gonna be a whole mess. Kevin Feige's watching us right now.
Talking with you and John. Anyway, what did you think of Makkari?
I thought she was incredible. I love that we've got a character that has a mental health issue, a character that represents a community that is differently abled. I think we have a character that represents a different sexuality than most people in the Midwest might see. We got a character that represents kind of like a zealousy that is really inherent to humanity. Like it represents way more people than I think even we look at it objectively.
Yeah, no, totally. I think objectively speaking, I think that's one thing that the movie, I love that they set out to do that, was take these cosmic beings and how do we make them relatable?
Yeah,
and
it does it times like 3 for each one.
How do we make them more grounded, keep them on Earth, and mainly watch them hang out?
And I love that. And I really liked Dazed and Eternals.
What do you think of Sprite?
She worked for me because the actress was able to do a lot with a little bit of time. The character in the comic books is really interesting because she's got a lot of time to discuss the things she survived, and in this she doesn't because there's so much going on. But I did buy the things that made her Sprite. I did buy the struggle with being young forever. I bought that, but there's a lot more in the comics. Also, I just put this together. This is my epiphany mid-review. I might have a different experience of being emotionally resonating with them because I was exposed to them before. Maybe I felt...
No, I think most people don't know the Eternals, and most people I talk to feel for this movie.
Okay.
Yeah,
because I was like, I just realized like I felt this about Sprite, but I knew a backstory for Sprite that most people wouldn't have.
I'm not going to say it's not a factor,
right?
Like when you see, because your experience you walk away from, you go, it has been improved upon, so I feel more for it.
Because I never felt for Druig, and now I do.
Well, for me, this is my introduction.
Right.
I only know facts about them prior to watching because I had to research crap. I think Sprite, like I saw some mixed opinions about her when talking with some people after the screening. I think she actually did an excellent job.
Oh, I totally.
And yes, we did do an interview with her, and I'm not going to hate when people say like,
here's the link.
We did an interview with her, but I'm not saying it because we did an interview with her. I actually think she did an excellent job. To hire a child actress who has to be not seen as a child when hanging out with these veteran actors where everyone is the same age, I was never like, they got a kid for this role. Like I just bought her as a person. I just bought her as one of them. I just bought her as equal of age. I never watched her in the light of I'm watching a child actor try to keep up with the, veteran actors. And I think that's a major testament to her performance.
I agree.
It's all bullshit. I'm just saying it because I interviewed her. No, that's a fact. I think Kit Harington, the brief amount of time he's in this movie, I think he has great screen presence. He's really funny and amusing. The post-credit scene's been ruined for a lot of people. We won't touch on it.
Oh, that sucks.
You were smart. Person from Variety.
I blocked Variety.
Dude, that person from Variety flat out right after the premiere just says what happened.
I heard, and I blocked them preemptively. And I blocked all the journalists.
So you heard he spoiled, but you didn't know what.
I didn't know what.
Yeah. Oh, that's what he spoiled. Yeah, he spoiled it. I was like, I don't believe this.
I had someone tweet it at me, but I had left my shit alone, and then I came back after the movie, and then I did my video about integrity. I do think that Variety, there should be repercussions.
It's a great post-credit scene.
Yeah.
If you already read what happened, it works so much better within context if you were kind of cynical towards what you heard.
Yeah. It would be weird at it, yeah.
Honestly, if I heard, I might be like,
what?
Really?
Yeah.
But watching it in the actual movie was like, oh, that's a good scene.
And there's two.
I think that last one was very predictable. I think like a year ago, everyone who semi follows Eternals was like, I think this is going to be the post credits. It's an important one, but there's a
button
flair to it that I will say that is not predictable.
Agreed.
That's what I'll leave that at.
And it's dope.
It's dope.
Both post-credit scenes are like, usually in Marvel, there's a post-credit scene that's like a stinger tied to the film and then a world-building one. Both of these are giant world-building ones, I'll say.
And as different as it is, I don't think it's completely devoid of both things about MCU that you might not like about some movies, and also typical MCU things that you do like about them.
Agreed.
There are qualities of both. Some are like, well, that's fortunate. there's a couple of moments where you're like, yeah. Yep. And there are structural things that I'm like, structurally, it's more about the scenes they place into the structure that make it more unique.
Okay.
But I think structurally, it's pretty similar.
See, I didn't feel like it was a 3-act structure at all because of the ticking clock thing happening later. I felt like I felt like it was like a 5-act film instead of a 3.
All right, so yeah, maybe it is more. The fact that we're having this conversation to this extent.
Usually, what, 20 minutes?
Because on our time, we won't clock into this. It's been over an hour. But the fact that we are having a conversation to this extent about it, and it's not talking about like this is stupid. It's perhaps it is more artistic than I gave it credit for.
Thank you.
Yeah. You know, gotta.
As the representative of this film, I appreciate your time.
Dude, I'm gonna be in the minority. Like, it's just.
I don't know if you will, dude.
It's a daunting experience. To be in the minority.
I think it's gonna be really interesting to see what people get out of this. I don't know that people will resonate like I did.
You know what's so weird to me about me saying I'm gonna be in the minority, and you are not the first person to tell me like I don't think you will. What's weird to me is I don't think this is a Last Jedi situation.
Oh, no, that's not even normal, though. That was insane. Yeah. That was unhealthy.
I don't think general fans are getting enough credit for being able to appreciate a movie like this.
I don't think general fans will want to have these conversations that are necessary to appreciate it.
You think people might just walk out and go, it's kind of boring?
Yeah, that's my fear, and I hope I'm wrong. Please be wrong. Every time I'm wrong and humanity's better than I think, I'm happy. That's why I like this movie.
I mean, I saw a couple of people who did not say this publicly, who thought it was a little pretentious.
Which I disagree with patently.
And
I think it does a great job normalizing things that could be pretentious.
As much as I craved more and wanted it to be better in these other areas, like for my personal taste, I never would have applied the word pretentious to it.
Not me either.
I'm
also pretentious.
Shit.
I love me a Malick film.
The fact that I'm dissecting a movie that I could have never written to this degree makes me pretentious. I'm just saying.
We comment on art for a living, Greg. Here we are.
Like, we're as pretentious as it gets, and I'm going like, I don't think it's pretentious.
I didn't think it was pretentious personally.
Yeah. No, I personally didn't find it pretentious, but I can't fault someone for finding it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's everybody's own experience, like what we've been saying.
I would still, just for the ambition, concept, and just filmmaking alone, I would still give this like a 3 to 3.5, somewhere there out of 5.
Mm-hmm.
Just for that fact alone. Just emotionally, I was like a 1.5 to 2. Right?
So if the film was a 5 and you feel 1.5, 3, 3.5.
I'm just like, I love the theme of choice with it here, and the actual choice on the filmmaking end, all around, from what they wanted to do to like script wise to the actual physical filmmaking, elevates what I would say, and that's why I still want people to watch this.
I give it a 4.5. I've only ever given.
Pretentious dick.
I am the monster. Who do I think I am? I've only ever, and in context, I've only ever given 16 films 5 stars, and only one of those is an MCU film. This is 4.5 stars for me because it succeeds at its very lofty ambitions, of which there are many. It is a movie about very brilliantly dense concepts to have discussions like this about, while never being boring or pretentious. And it also elevates the entire filmmaking and comic book alike. Like, it elevates comic books, it elevates movies, it allows you to make a $200 million indie film, and it does that while having a conversation that elevates one of my favorite franchises ever. It is a very clean A for me, and it does things that I didn't think were possible, so it gets that extra half.
This is so funny. This is so long. I hope people will not be turned off by looking at the length of it.
Do you mean like the runtime of Eternal?
Yeah. I hope people don't get turned off.
You might cut like 5 minutes.
Like, I don't want them to get turned off by the runtime when they see it, because I don't know. I'm happy we had this conversation. And
in fairness, you went up a half point. You were at 3 last night, and you're now to 3.5.
Yeah, no,
I got some wiggle out of it.
Definitely. The fact that we are having this conversation to like this and not about
the Marvel stuff,
a typical review of just like, let's make a bullet point.
We didn't
list.
Talk cinematography. We barely talked directing, which is essential.
You guys just need to know that's great, right? That's all good. Like, don't worry about that.
And I think we're gonna get you after our spoiler conversation at like 3.75. I think we're going to go up a little bit more. I think you're either going to be a lock.
I'm going to watch it.
3.75.
I'm going to watch it again before we do our spoiler talk.
Yep.
And I'll be honest.
I love it. I think we'll get them there. And I would love to know what you guys think as well in the comments. I read these comments like a monster. I'm an idiot. I read YouTube comments. Who do I think I am? A fool.
I try to be as clear cut as possible, and people still will go, Greg just...
Did he assume this?
Greg just won't say it's boring or something.
Marvel like, chill. I just can't say it.
I don't think it's boring, but I also don't find it particularly exciting. exciting. Which is sound like I'm
4.5
sorry.
stars.
I have a great emotion about it. What do you know? Thank you guys for being here. Hopefully some people watch this. And see you guys soon.